Welcome to the Bad Boss Brief. I am Stephanie Peirolo.
And I'm Eugene S. Robinson.
And we are at episode 72, which we are calling the Not Rich Show.
Also known as the Spirit of 72.
What is the Spirit of 72? Are you just like making stuff
it's
up?
the Spirit of 76, but whatever. Right. I figured most people wouldn't remember that. So
76. What we want to talk about today is, what do you do if you are not as financially well off or secure as people that you hang out with, right? It might be the people
or even coworkers.
Right. That's what I mean. Like it could be coworkers, it could be people in your neighborhood, it could be people that you went to school with or your family. How do you navigate those kinds of discrepancies?
I have to tell you, this is funny. I was in my first job out of college. I was in the HR director's office, and she had left me there to go grab something for 2 seconds, and there was a folder on her desk that said salaries. And I get the little angels on the shoulder, right? One was like, go ahead, read it, Eugene. This is your chance. And the other one was like, it's a violation of privacy. So naturally, my lesser angel won out, and I opened the folder and, quickly scanned and saw what people's salaries were. And then I realized the real curse was that I couldn't act like I had seen what I had seen because I wasn't supposed to have done it. But it was a lot of heavy lifting after that to improve my attitude. This is stuff you don't need to know.
Because you were resentful or envious of the people who are making.
Yeah. The other associate editor was making like $5,000 more than I was in a time when, my first job out of college, I think I was making. It's funny to say now, I was making like $25,000 a year. Ooh, it's like when I a steak used to cost a nickel. So he was making like, just a little bit more than me, but it just irked me to no end. But of course I couldn't say anything about it. So anyway, sorry, that was a tangent.
Well, no, but I think you bring up something which is to just acknowledge and name that money is fraught for a lot of people. Thinking about money, talking about money, and, kind of comparing ourselves with others can bring up a lot of emotion. And I will make a confession to you, Eugene. I have a tremendous amount of envy for you, and I will tell you why.
Okay.
You and I are exactly the same age. We went to the same college.
One of us is a week older, but okay, I got you.
Yeah, that would be me. We are a week apart in age. Yep. We went to the same college. We have both worked very hard in kind of related fields. And you are able to retire, and you built a beautiful house in Spain, and you are living there now. And I am still very much in the throes of corporate work. And my financial advisor, when I ask him, like, when can I afford to retire, kind of does the financial advisor version of clutching his pearls and is like, well, let's look at that when you're 70, which is many years away. And so we're in a position, and again, to be super clear, like, neither one of us comes from money. Inheritances didn't or won't rain down upon us. You worked your ass off. And I am glad, as your friend, having watched you work multiple jobs and you're much more careful with your money than I ever have been. I am glad you have that success. I think what comes up for me and manifests as envy is more of a sense of almost like grief. That like there are circumstances that happen in my life, most notably when my son was in a car accident and was disabled, and all of the financial havoc that happens to families that have to deal with illness and disabilities. There's reasons for the fact that I am in a different financial position, and there's grief and longing that's associated with that. But, I don't know. It's just an interesting thing. And it's funny because it's like, I don't think we've ever actually talked about it in real life, have we?
No. No, we haven't. But it's but there are a lot of happy accidents that had to happen for me to end up here, right? For example, going through my divorce, my ex-wife, who was a lawyer, could have chosen to savage me, and I refused to hire a lawyer for the divorce. And she said, "Are you going to trust me?" And I go, "Are you going to rob me?" And see me, destitute and on my last pair of shoes at every graduation and weddings and stuff like that. No, of course I trust you. So I mean, it really does take a village in a lot of certain specific ways. And there are other people like you who we have very similar kind of monograph, who didn't have Silicon Valley mover and shaker. His name is Brian. I'm sure, doesn't need his last name dragged into this, but he sat down and figured out that by making two wrong moves at the wrong time, he screwed himself out of $70 million. He sat down with a calculator and figured out how much he lost. I mean, he was at Next and he was at Apple when the stock price was like $8 per. Had thousands of shares. Thought, yeah, this is going nowhere. Started a company. And his wife wanted to go back to Chicago to have their first kid. So he said, "I'm leaving the company." And the guys like sold the company to like Oracle, and they all drive Rolls Royces now. I mean, a lot of it is just doing horrible things for a long time and just not stopping. Right. And when I lost a job, being still the guy who wanted to work in media, it would really piss the ex-wife off. It's like she almost thought I was doing it purposefully. Magazines go out of business. I didn't have anything to do with that. But so it's been, and I mean, I used to live in a van. I used to eat dead grass. So there were all these reasons and things that kind of kicked in, up to and including the fact that after about 6 months at Stanford, my mom said, "I'm going through a divorce now. Can't pay for you to go to Stanford, so figure it out or come back to Brooklyn College." So I've been on this like kind of emergency footing since about 1981, and and the thing that I have to do now is not be panicked about money. It's just become a habit, right? So
well, and that's an interesting point, because I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who has is working part-time, our age, also working part-time, and she's been broke for such significant periods of her life that she forgets that she can buy a shirt. It's like,
Yep. And that's it. Just a shirt.
Yeah,
period. Yes,
exactly. And that you can get in a habit of mind when you have had financial insecurity that doesn't leave you. And I think also you bring up an interesting point. One of the key differences is that when I got divorced, my ex-husband was not as helpful.
Yeah.
And, the also looking at, for a lot of people, including myself, our financial reversals are systemic issues, not individual issues. Correct. Right. So I am not unable to retire because I was a profligate spender. Right. I didn't have a gambling problem. I didn't have, I got sober really young and early in my career. I don't do crazy shopping. I don't invest in, but there are systemic things that were out of my control, right? Most women who are single moms who are divorced fare badly, whereas men who are divorced fare well. My ex-husband is in a very good position financially, right? Yeah. And so that's a systemic thing. If we had
I have to give my ex-wife a lot of credit as well, because I was very much I'll live, even though I was constantly panicked about money, I just, the whole conspiracy thing sat on top of my head like a, like a bad drug habit. And I started to think, okay, you know what? They just keep inventing these things to take your money. First it's Social Security, then it's 401k. Now it's IRA Roth. These instruments designed to take I'm not going to do any of that. And she said, and I thought at the time that it was a moment of a great unkindness. She goes, "You got to do stuff because I'm not taking care of you when you get old." And I was like, okay, well, you know what? You're not going to have to. So it was a part of like, I'll show you. But I did start to like take that stuff seriously. Like, oh, what's the employee stock? I really was not of the mind to get employee stock purchase plan. What the bullshit, you know? Nah, it's not. It's not, you know,
Right.
because and the guy, Brian, who lost $70 million, he explained it to me the best way. He goes, look, even if you turn around and sell it tomorrow, it's still 15% below market. So you make, I was like, I get it. And then I forgot how to gain access to it for literally a decade because I don't have a financial bone in my fucking body. I just, you know, you go to the website and you do this thing and this other thing and I just got, so literally I forgot I had it. So it's maybe more infuriating. It's like, I'd like to take credit, like I'm some kind of financial genius, but I just forgot I had it. So.
Well, and you know, and you bring up an interesting point. Like one of the things that I was thinking about, you know, in the show is like, what are some of the things that get in the way for us in terms of like realistically assessing our financial situation, right? And you bring up a good one, which is education, right? Learning about finances. So like a lot of people I know, nobody taught me about money. Nobody taught me how to balance a checkbook when we did those things in the day. And when we had checkbooks, nobody taught me about saving. Nobody taught me to like be careful with credit cards and pay them off at the end of the month. All stuff that I taught my kids. There was no, you know, my family had really weird ideas about money, and that's what I grew up with. And so I just continued that. And when I was newly divorced and super broke. I mean, I didn't live out of a van and eat grass, but I really had trouble paying my bills, and I had 2 little kids and wasn't always sure how I was going to feed them. And, it was tough. There was that winter where I was living in rural Washington State, and a friend of mine found out how broke I was living in this little rental place in the middle of nowhere. And she's she's Native American, a member of a tribe down there. And she's like, look, I can hunt all year. Here's an elk. My freezer was full of elk and venison. For that whole winter, we ate elk and venison that she gave me because she knew that otherwise, like, it was going to be rice and beans for the entire winter. So, you know, I made the mistake of being so overwhelmed financially that I wouldn't open my bills. Again, this is, paper bills, right? I wouldn't open my bills until they had like red letters stamped on them, which for those of you that are under 40 mean you're going into collections, red letters on the outside of your bills.
How about this one? Did you do when you when you wrote a check and you didn't have enough money to cover that check, the magnetic letter numbers on the bottom of the check, you would make holes in them because then they couldn't machine count them. They would have to hand count them, and you could get yourself another day.
I never knew that. See, we should have discussed this when we were in our 20s, when it was a little bit more germane.
I was broke into the 30s, so but
I did not. No, I didn't know that. But the thing was, I got in more trouble financially because I ignored my finances, and it wasn't until I was in like my late 30s that I realized like I am responsible for my financial well-being as, at the time, a single mom. And so I learned about, the retirement accounts. I learned about repairing my credit, which was, of course, a complete disaster at that point. And I got advice, which I have continued to do, and it's made a huge difference, right? So if you are in this circumstance and this is resonating for you as your personal experience, try to get some education from reputable people, right? Like not everybody that you're going to see online is going to be useful. If you do get a financial advisor, try to get one that's fee-based. Right. Rather than like,
and stay away from books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah.
No. Or anybody that starts a podcast out with clapping.
No clapping. But, I think and then I think back to this idea of it being systemic, right? So, I would be a lot calmer about retirement and would probably retire early if I live in the United States. If I knew that Social Security was going to pay me the money that I had been putting into it since I got a job at 13, And if I understood that our healthcare system was going to be such that I could get access to insurance and have copays and pays for, payments for any medication that I might need that would be reasonable, which at this point, neither one of those things are secure or, in the case of the healthcare system, even likely. And that is a systemic issue that's pretty significant. I mean, you are, living in Spain for many reasons. I fortunately have dual citizenship and we could go and live in Europe. But the reason that I would go and live in Europe is to be able to not have to pay, the crazy medical bills.
Yeah. That is, I mean, I described it. Somebody was asking and they wanted me to get into some kind of political chit chat, and I was not interested in doing that because Trump, in my mind, is a self-correcting problem. But I said the reality of it is systemically, as we're talking about it, America is like a casino, and there was like they couch it. Economic theorists will say, well, what we're really about is keeping the money in circulation. We don't want you just sitting on it, so we do things to create incentives to keep it in circulation. Yeah, that's a nice way of saying we're going to rob you. I mean, you just can't, you want to insure a home in California? Good luck with that. After all the mudslides and the fires and the earthquakes and the floods. Okay, so you health insurance you have because you have your own business for a family of three. I mean, it's just, it's a weird nickel and dime thing. And then you realize I don't have any nickels and dimes. I mean, the guys that got me thinking about this, about making the move, were music guys who just said the same thing over and over again. Can't get old in America. I was like, of course they started telling me this in their 40s. Like, what are they talking about? They don't know what they're talking about. But then as you start to get older, you're like, and those are my cautionary tales, that my stepfather, my mother's second husband, is 85 years old and still scrounging up freelance work. Don't want that to be, absolutely positively don't want that to be my future. The fact that my father, who died last year at 86 years old, was still, getting up and going on. He's a professor, and to a certain degree, he loved his job, but nobody loves a job so much they want to be doing it at 86, So these are not the futures I want to have. I don't want my kids to see me having that kind of future. I want to set out a different example somehow for them. And I'm not, it's not cessation of work. I'm not retired from working. I'm doing stuff that I like to do. I'm retired from doing stuff for other people that I don't want to do.
Right. So, well, and what's interesting about retirement is that there was an article by Jessica Hall a year ago in Market Watch that says, as of late 2024, people with household incomes of less than $50,000 had saved a median of $2,000 in household retirement accounts. And 1 in 3 of people making less than $50,000 had no savings in retirement account at all, zero savings. Right. And the challenge is that people who make less money often work very physical jobs. So they will not physically be able to work past maybe the age of 65. I mean, I may or may not choose to sit here and write stuff or get up and do trainings, but I'm not putting roofs on buildings. I'm not, a carpenter, an electrician, or somebody that needs to might not physically be able to work. And those are the people that are impacted. And on the other hand, back to this article, those with household incomes of more than 200,000 saved 565,000. That's median. Right. Yeah. So you've got this, again, not surprisingly, huge gap of people who have worked their whole lives. Right. You and I have worked very, very hard, often at, like you said, some horrible jobs. And it's not for lack of working. It's for lack of being able to save adequately for retirement. So there is this huge kind of like binary and division that just, again, under the current political situation keeps getting greater.
Well, and I mean, and also the early life lessons of poverty served in our good stead. I mean, this is the first house where my books haven't been in milk crates. And I'm 63. So I was like, bookshelf, why would I'll just use a milk crate where I actually bought a bookshelf. Who buys such a thing, a bookshelf? It's crazy. Right. So, I mean, and also it's kind of immunized me against, I remember going through the divorce, and it was a strange thing to do. I was looking for places outside where I might be able to sleep because I figured I was going to have to sleep outside. That was the reality of it. I'm not going to break the savings plan that I had going on and spend $4,000 a month on Bay Area rents because I was moving out of the family house. So I found, if you remember, in Redwood City, there used to be there's right by the marina and the women's jail. There had been a Toys R Us, and there's this water comes under the bridge, so you could actually like you went out there for an afternoon and sat and waited for the water. The water doesn't come all the way up to the top. I could put my sleeping bag here. And I remember talking to a lawyer and saying, like, listen, going through this divorce, I think I'm going to end up being homeless. And the guy just looked at me. He was like, this is California. Unless that's really your desire, you don't have to do that. And in actual fact, my ex-wife said at the time, she was like, oh, we're going to be financially ruined. I said, no, we're not. We're not paying lawyers. You're going to do it. We got a mediator for $300, and I trust you. And I don't want any money from you. She out-earned me all but 3 years. And I said, all the money that you would give me for spousal support, which is ridiculous in my mind, give to the kids. We'll put it in the kids' college fund. And that's how they all managed to go to college without leaving it greatly in debt, So, again, a number of different happy accidents had to happen to get here. But I've been keenly aware of the fact that I'm sort of immunized against total failure because I've eaten dead grass and because I've lived in a van, and I wouldn't find that especially onerous to do again. I would feel bad, making a kid who's known nothing but luxury live in a van with me. But you got to do what you got to do.
Right.
And as long as you're together and happy, it's a whole family thing that kind of shields you against that kind of misery. So.
Well, and there's a couple of things just personally that I think have been useful to me, right? So one is I don't need to compare. It's a recovery phrase, like don't compare your insides to someone else's outsides, right? Like recognizing when I first, early in my career, single mom, I was working for a television station selling advertising, which at the time was very, very lucrative. And so I worked with a lot of women who had a ton of money. Right. Most of them were married to men who were also making tons of money. And they would, like casual conversation was like, financing their second home. I didn't even own a first home. Right. I remember this woman saying to me like, well, I had bought a used car. And she was like, well, I always pay cash for my cars. And I'm like, bitch, please. You think I have $10,000 lying around? I can pay cash. Of course I'm financing a vehicle. It was that kind of thing. And I felt really insecure about it. And what I realized is like, I just don't need to talk about it, right? There's a reason why we don't talk about money. Like those people don't need to know that I don't have any kind of mortgage at all because I don't own any property. And I don't need to continue to have conversations with them about what I can just be non-committal and I can be quiet. And I think the same thing goes for the flip side, right? It's like having the social awareness. Like I can have this conversation with you because you are more financially stable than I am at this moment, but I'm not going to sit here and complain about it like some sort of stereotypical boomer sitting in my house, which I own in Seattle, talking to somebody who's like in their 20s, who is never going to be able to buy a house in Seattle, who is never going to have that kind of financial security that I was able to get a quarter of a century ago, practically, when I bought my house. So one is like being aware of like, there's stuff you don't need to say, right? And then I think the other thing is recognizing, I don't know, I was thinking about this. I was at a party. I was dating a guy who was very wealthy. And we were at a wedding of other wealthy people. And I was sitting at this table and people were talking about their number, which is the amount of money that they felt that they needed to have to retire.
Oh, God.
And they were big, big numbers. How big? They're talking about the numbers like, 10 million.
Okay.
Right. And, I presumably for the lifestyle that they had, these were people with, the boats and the planes and the, all of these things. I don't know. But I thought to myself, maybe, you tell me what you think about this. I have found that people who are good at sex don't need to talk about how good they are at sex or how many people they have had sex with. And I was like, what if it's the same with money? If you really have money, do you need to talk about your money?
I know a few billionaires at this point, right? Based on my time in Silicon Valley, and they are, and I know them through jujitsu. And I created this dynamic at jujitsu where we would always make fun of each other for having money. Like Mike became chief of police in Mountain View, became Mansion Mike because he bought a little house with, like some square footage in Morgan Hill, And so and then somebody said at one point, you have money. Why are you trying to make money be this shameful thing? I go, because it's Silicon Valley and somebody's got to do it, right? But the billionaires, they never really, they were not weird about money at all, but the millionaires or the multimillionaires were almost disgustingly weird about it. Like, hey, I'm going to go over to 7, to Safeway to get something before training. You want something? Yeah, well, yeah. Look, I'm treating you. Well, yeah. I mean, because does this mean later I'm going to have? It's like, just stop being so fucking weird about money. And the cool thing is, the difference is now in Spain, I've met people now. I have some sort of social network that's developing. I've known since now, say October 1st. I've never asked what I do. Never. Like never. Right. That in the first 30 seconds in Silicon Valley, that's the topic of conversation, right? I mean, from October 1st to now, they never asked what I do.
Right. Which I think is very American to say, what do you do, as if you're, entirely supported by, you are your job, right? That's your identity. Yep. I mean, I think the other thing too, one advantage of having been broke for very formative years is I really don't need a lot of stuff.
Yep.
And there's a real freedom to that. Like, one of the things I would advise is don't spend money to keep up with people around you.
Yeah.
Right. Like, there was a time where I used to do a lot of work with people at Microsoft. I live in Seattle. I was in business development. I was over at the Microsoft campus a lot.
Right.
And frequently women there dressed really nicely. The men wore fleeces, but the women dressed really nicely. And I remember one time looking and being like, okay, I don't know that much about fashion, but that woman is wearing probably $5,000 worth of clothes and shoes, maybe more if we look at the handbag. And that's not even getting...
For sure. What? It's a $4,000 Hermes handbag,
right. And that's not even getting into how much it costs to do her hair and her nails and her, whatever plastic surgery she's had or whatever. And I didn't ever feel like I really need to get the, shoes with the red soles or whatever. Like, I was like,
Les Boutons.
Yeah. It's like, I don't even know the name, but I was like, I'm going to go the other way. Like, I have clothes that I have had and wear frequently for like 20 years. I'm like, that's not a fashion thing. That's a and so the idea of like, I don't think you can ever like catch up. And I think it's okay to realize, and sometimes there were accommodations. Like when I bought my house, it was very modest and I didn't have money to fix it up. So it was not a fancy house and it was not in a fancy neighborhood. I'm south of Seattle, and I wouldn't have people over to my house because I felt a little insecure about it. And that when these, people that I work with were not and have never really been my friends. But what I realized is like, if I don't want to have people to my house, I don't have to have them to my house. We can meet for lunch if we have some kind of social gathering. I'm not going to try to remodel my home so that it looks like the kind of places where they were living in, Medina or Queen Anne or the more kind of expensive areas of Seattle. And that served me well. Right. And so I think recognizing, and I think what I also realized is that, Seattle has plenty of rich people too, just like Silicon Valley. The ones I've met, like they're not more happy than people who aren't, and especially for people who spent so much time at work that they weren't around when their kids were growing up, or they don't have great relationships. Like there's a lot of stuff that I have that is a result of being around, being present, being, available as a parent, as a grandparent, that's very joyful to me. Right. And I will take those things. And so I think a lot of it is just recognizing, having a perspective about what's important.
Also, I mean, if you take some of these folks who have a lot of money that's not intergenerational money, so the money they've had to earn, if you take away what they did to get that money, there's really nothing left that's there. Like you don't have like what's the last book you read? I'm not reading any books. I'm working on this grind. Like there's no there for them. But
Right.
I mean, I don't want to critique. I mean, money in my mind could be value neutral. You could just have it or not have it, or you could spend it well, you could spend it stupidly. But I mean, the idea ultimately in my mind is to maximize the amount of time you spend doing stuff that you like and minimize the stuff that you don't like. And I've seen people who have had, I couldn't have been happier when I was when I was working in a fast health food restaurant and I was 16 years old. I really liked that job, and I think about it fondly. Now still. And I was working with grown adults who were like doing that as like a life thing, right? I was in high school. We had a few college students, but you had some adults, men in their 20s and women in their 30s, who were like, this is one of my jobs. This is like, and I didn't feel like they applied themselves in a shameful way. They were doing what they had to do. They didn't feel, it's not like they went home and go, oh my God, when am I going to write, my novel? Or they were just completely healthily in place with what it is that they were doing,
Right.
So I mean, out of, like I said, my kids, I've seen a lot of these parents that expensive schools my kids have gone to are like, you're going to become a lawyer. You're going to do this. You're going to do, no, I've never wanted anything for my kids except for them to be happy. That's it. You be happy or satisfied, maybe is even a better word. So I don't need all that weird Silicon Valley American go-go stuff. Just, don't ask me for a lot of money, and be happy. So,
well, and I think also
can go hand in hand. So
be intentional about the people you surround yourself with. I mean, my close friends share my values. A lot of us are artists. A lot of them are people doing work for social justice, trying to make the world better. None of us are rich. Right. Yeah. And we share a sense of values. So, all right. Well, that's all we've got time for today. Thanks for listening. If you have any ideas for future sessions, future things we should talk about, or sessions, like that's what I call my meetings with my clients.
We're also going to monetize this to the extent that you guys could buy subscriptions to this show as well.
That is true. That is true. And we are going to do some cool stuff in the new year. We have some plans about doing some, maybe some lives, maybe some office hours. So there's going to be more ways for you to interact with us. And in the meantime, send us questions, WTF@badbossbrief.com. Take care, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Bye.
Adios.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bad Boss Brief podcast with your host, Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Peirolo. You can check out more of their work by visiting speirolo.substack.com for Stephanie and eugenesrobinson.substack.com for Eugene. You can also find Eugene at Mr. Sleep 3, that's the number 3, on Insta. Reach out with your questions, concerns, work case situations, or suggestions to us at WTF@badbossbrief.com. Stephanie will personally answer every single submission. Be sure to join us at badbossbrief.substack.com every other Wednesday for new episodes of Bad Boss Brief so you can gain further insights into your workplace environments. Until next time, don't be an asshole at work.